Know your Constitution. During the year, we set up information tables at various venues. Oh, he's sneaking away getting his camera. All right. Homeschool shows, gun shows, and county fairs and other places like that. And what we've learned in the last 7 or 8 years is that very few people outside of our confines knows much about the Constitution. At a gun show we did in Nashua, New Hampshire, just early February, the very first question on this little 10-question quiz, you can't read it all, but I'll review it, is which amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms? And everyone at the gun show got that one right, but it went downhill from there. Now, homeschoolers tend to be much, much better, but a lot of times they'll say, oh, I studied that 3 years ago. Yeah? So they forgot it. And we tell them, look, the Constitution isn't something you studied 3 years ago and forget. This is a manual. This is an owner's manual for a free country, or for a free people. We had Scott Brown stop by our table once at a fair. Scott Brown was a former U.S. Senator from Massachusetts. He lost his seat. He moved to New Hampshire to run again in New Hampshire. And we asked him to take the quiz. And it looked like a vampire in garlic. I mean, he was afraid of this quiz because he would have failed miserably. We did have one candidate running for the U.S. Senate. He got 8 out of 10 right. And it was kind of interesting because he got the question wrong, how old you have to be a U.S. Senator. Who, by the way, knows that? Campers. Yes?
30.
Good, all right, you got it. See that? Now, what you just told me, I would say that 85% of adults have no clue.
I would have said 37.
See? Okay, so about 5 or 6 years ago, Keene State College had an event. It was called Got Rights. And you see, back during the Reagan administration, they passed a law. They said if you need federal money, listen to this and tell me what's wrong with this particular picture, right? They passed a law, Reagan signed it, that if your school or your college or some entity receives federal money, then they have to take time out during the time of the Constitution. When was the Constitution signed?
1777.
What was it? No, I'm talking about the convention, and then the convention ended when? One person put the hand up. Anybody know? The answers are all here, by the way. It was September 17th, 1787, right? So that's known as Constitution Day. So if the school gets federal money, they have to set aside some time to teach people on the Constitution. Does that sound constitutional to you?
No.
What's wrong with that picture? What's wrong? Yes, sir.
The federal government has no...
You can stand up and identify, yeah.
The federal government has no jurisdiction over education at all.
That's right. So the federal government, that's good. The federal government passes a law that says that if you're receiving unconstitutional funds from the federal government, then you have to teach people about the Constitution. Kind of interesting. You have a question?
Also,
Stand up.
Also, can't you say that the schools were supposed to be doing that before they received?
The schools should be doing that. That's right. That's a very good point. They should be doing that anyway. So anyway, I was invited, and it was a panel. There was a lady from the ACLU. She was the New Hampshire director. They don't know what that is. That's the American Civil Liberties Union, which is not very American and not very civil and not very, I mean, it's a very far left organization. They have a complete different view of this Constitution. And not only that, she was actually a practicing witch. She didn't ride on a broomstick, but she probably should have. And then there was a liberal professor. It really takes a lot of effort to find a liberal professor at a state college, but they found one, right? And then they had somebody who said he was a conservative professor, but he wasn't a constitutionalist. There was one state rep who actually was an instructor here who was a constitutionalist, Jen Coffey, and little old me. And I had so much fun that time. Everybody they put constitutions on every single chair. There was about 150, maybe a little more than that, almost all students, a few people from the area. And we all had an opening statement. And I said to the people in the audience, I said, all of you have received one of these constitutions. I know most of you will leave these on your chairs. And if you do, I'm picking them up and I'm going to give them to people who love liberty and freedom. But at the end of the day, at the end of the event, all the constitutions were taken. So All right, now, let's do a little review on the Constitution. And I'm going to put your hands up, okay? How many amendments are there to the Constitution? Yes. Go with the glasses.
Oh, 27 in
All
sub.
right, you got it. Thank you. Okay, how many articles are there to the Constitution?
7.
7 articles, right? We all get that? By the way, did you all bring our constitutions?
Yes.
Okay. And we all know the preamble, don't we?
Yes.
Now, where do rights come from? It's not really spelled out in this one, but it's spelled out in the Declaration of Independence. Yes, sir.
God.
Okay, now how do we know that? Well, we know that through the Declaration of Independence. And what does it say?
It says
That all men are created equal and that they are
they are
endowed
given
by Darwin. Did it say endowed by Darwin?
No, endowed with certain unalienable rights.
By their creator, okay?
By their creator, yeah.
Now, what type of government, and if you don't learn anything this week, what type of government do we have? Come on. Yes. A republic. Wait a minute now. I heard the president, and you say any president, not this current president, say that we're a democracy. So which could it be? Is it the same? Is there a difference? Who wants to look up Article 4, Section 4 in the U.S. Constitution and be the first one? Come on. The first one that gets it will get a $5 coupon. An extra. You're all going to get one. You got an extra one. Just the campers, not the adults. You got it. Okay, stand up and read it really loud.
The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government.
You hear that? That's it. That's what I'm looking for. What kind of government? Okay, so your owner's manual says what kind of government are we? So why do we say democracy? Well, not a democracy. The founders were very much hated democracy. James Madison in the Federalist, number 10, the Federalist Papers were a series of letters to the local newspaper in New York, Madison, Hamilton, and John Jay, to encourage the people in New York to accept the Constitution. And the 10th, Federalist 10, James Madison said that democracies are spectacles of turbulence and contention, short in their lives and violent in their deaths. And in your bag, you got a nice little essay written by Robert Welch called Republics and Democracies. So please read that. And if you were here over the years, you got one every year you were here. Okay? That means what do you do with it when you have an extra something?
Give it away.
And I suggest give it to one of your teachers. Give it to one of your teachers. And say, can you read this? And tell me, I got this from this crazy right-wing Christian camp. They teach the Constitution. Teacher, can you tell me what's wrong with this essay? You know, underline where it's wrong. See what happens. It'd be kind of fun, right? Okay, so I'm going to review this quiz. And this is something we put together, and people love taking quizzes. I put a copy of this up on our camp script page, and we got like over 1,000 views, and people take it. The first question, you can't read it, but you know, I can give you copies if you like, and all of you should have these. You actually should make up your own. And you know what we do? We have little information tables, and we started doing this in Boston Common, downtown Boston. And Dr. Kishore helped me, and one time my son was with me. We're going to do this on a regular basis. I want to encourage you to do likewise. And you don't have to be a walking encyclopedia on the Constitution. I am not. You know, I learn about it, and then I teach people what I learn. So I learn things all the time, and I can't recite every case, every Supreme Court case. That's not what it's about. But you can have a working knowledge of the Constitution and share that with other people. So we have this 10-question quiz, and the first family, you know, in Boston, you get tourists from all over the world, all over the country. Some of the tourists do a lot better than the Bostonians, and the Bostonians are pathetic. But the tourists, and everyone's friendly. We didn't have any hostility the few times we've done it. We're going to do it on a more regular basis. There's a family from Indiana. I think they were homeschoolers, like 5 or 6 of them, and they're all cheerful and smiled. And I said, I bet you didn't expect to come to Boston and find some conservative organization on Boston Common giving out constitutions. So they took the quiz and they all did well, and we all offer a free copy of the Constitution. So question number 1, and you can answer it by putting your hands up. Which amendment protects the right in keep and bear arms? Okay, so many different. Yes, sir. Second Amendment. Now, It says protects, doesn't it? Then how come we hear people say, I have a right given to me by the Second Amendment? Did that give us something?
No.
Picture this, it's April 19, 1775, and there's a militia in Lexington. And the British are marching up what is now Massachusetts Avenue. And then British come up and say, get rid of your, throw down your arms and disperse, you villains, right? Can you imagine? Well, gee, folks, we don't have a Second Amendment yet. I guess we have to go. No. You have a right to defend yourself. And Second Amendment just says Congress can't mess with that. And it's interesting, too. It says a well-regulated, somebody read that for me. Look it up. First person to get it gets a, I know you know it by heart. Oh, who's the first? Oh, you first one up. Right here. Stand up.
Okay.
Stand up. No, not you. Oh, he was the first. He was the first hand. But I'll give you a coupon too for your enthusiasm. Okay.
All right, second.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to keep the peace.
No. Sit down. But thank you. But you still get a coupon. All right. Yes, sir.
I'll go.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
infringed, right?
And I quote the Second Amendment.
All right. Good. Okay. But thank you for your help.
Question.
Yeah.
Does the right to keep and bear arms include machine guns? Stuff
That's a
like
good
that?
question. And I'm not, Mr. Larry Pratt will be here Thursday and Friday, and he'll go over all that in much more detail. It was interesting, too, because there was a merchant vessel right after the Constitution was ratified and the Bill of Rights of 1791. And the merchant, the captain, he said, gee, can we have cannons? Well, of course you can have cannons. I mean, wait, you can't keep cannons away, right? And they did have muskets that fired more than one round, but it was so expensive that they did, the government said, well, you can't own those, right? But anyway, the militia is an interesting term, too. We used to have something called a militia, and it doesn't really exist the way it should be, but that's a topic for another time. So the Second Amendment simply protects the right, not gives it to you. And how many people read their state constitutions? Now, we have people, anybody read their state yeah. States have constitutions, you know. Anybody read their state constitutions? Well, you should. I know Mr. King reads the Massachusetts Constitution. The Massachusetts Constitution is the oldest constitution still being used in the world. It's been amended a whole lot of times, but you go in there and it says that it's a lot more stronger than here. It says that you have the right not only to defend yourself, but to protect your property. And it also says that you have an obligation to worship the great architect of the universe. They weren't talking about Bechtel Corporation either, by the way. So be familiar with your state constitutions. They say, so people pointed to the Second Amendment, point to your constitution first, okay? We already mentioned this. What is the age requirement of the U.S. Senate? And somebody said 30. So how about a member of the House of Representatives? Oh boy, these guys are so fast. Someone who has a 25. How about president? Yes.
30.
No. Yes.
35.
Excellent, okay. And where do we find out, I asked this question during the presidential debates. And I don't usually watch a lot of debates because it's not really debating, it's just sound biting. And I asked this question on my Facebook page. I said, where do you find the job description for the U.S. president? Now, we're told that the president is the most powerful man in the free world, whatever that is. That's not his job description. The term free world is not in there. So where do you find his job description? It's not in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. Somebody, I put it's not in the New York Times. We find it in Article 2, don't we? And the president has, I don't know, 8 or 9 powers and a couple of duties. And that's about it. So how can he be the most powerful man in the free world? He appoints ambassadors, he appoints Supreme Court justices, but the Senate has to approve. He gives a State of the Union address, but he doesn't have to do it every year. You know, he can give pardons, reprieves. He does sign. That's a powerful thing, signing. And okay, so now this one, I love this one because we don't try to embarrass people. You know, there are a lot of these people who have YouTube channels and they go out in the street and they ask people simple questions and they can't even, have no idea. That's not what our job is. Our job isn't to make people feel dumb. Our job is to teach people. And I know when somebody teaches me something, I appreciate that. And I don't care what your worldview, I mean, if you're conservative or liberal. My 8th grade history teacher, Mrs. Wolf, I'll never forget her. She made us memorize stuff in this Constitution. And I can't tell you if she was a liberal or conservative. I just knew that the last time I threw a spitball, I threw it in the ceiling, and I was her prize student. She looked at me and she says, "Harold, I'm surprised at you." And I never threw a spitball ever again. But she did make one mistake, and I want to address this. We hear about the 3/5 compromise. It's in Article 1 of the Constitution. Anybody know what the 3/5 compromise is? Oh boy, the same old. Anybody else? Yes. Jordan, you'd stand up.
It was
Loud.
a compromise where they would take the total population and then take 3/5 of it, and that would be the population.
No, not exactly.
It was when
Stand up.
they counted slaves as only 3/5 of a person instead
Okay.
a citizen instead of
Okay.
a whole citizen.
Now that sounds kind of, well, gee, 5 black people are only equal to 3 white people. That doesn't sound very good, right? So this is kind of a racist document. You know, Frederick Douglass read this Constitution when he learned how to read. Where's Reverend Kraft? Remember, what did he say about this?
I don't exactly remember the exact quote.
He
but
said-
basically he said, no, it's a document of freedom.
That's right, that's right.
I can't quote it
And
exactly.
Rev stood in the pulpit where he stood. I took him in Boston, okay? Now but when the Constitution was adopted, you only had a couple of, there were 13 states, colonies, states. Well, there were states then under the Articles of Confederation. You only had a couple of states that were free. Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and I think Pennsylvania. All the other states were slave states. Connecticut, New York. See, the people in the North, oh, we're so terribly superior to those evil Southerners because we got rid of slavery. You didn't get rid of slavery for a long time. It just wasn't very profitable. You didn't have a lot of slave population. So the states with large slave populations, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, they said, let's count all persons. And why? Why do you count? What's the purpose of counting people when it comes to the federal government? Not today, but back then.
Taxes.
Well, yes, but actually you're right. But it's apportionment in Congress. So in other words, the more people you have, the more representation you have in Congress. So if you had 1 million slaves, you might have about 5 or 6 more members of Congress. But those slaves don't vote, do they? So the slave states, or the states with large slave populations, would have had much more power, right? So the states with small slave populations or no slaves said, no, we're not going to go for that because you're going to have more votes. So they made a compromise. They wanted to have a union. They made a compromise. And by the way, this Constitution never said you had to be a slave state. States were free or had the option to free their slaves. Some of it took too long, unfortunately, and then we had a great civil war that eventually led to the abolition of slavery. Question 3: which amendment reads, "From each according to his ability, from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs"? Look it up. Look it up. Which amendment? Look it up. Oh, it's in the Constitution. Is it in the Constitution?
No, it's in the Communist.
It's in the Communist Manifesto, right? That's Karl Marx. You'd be surprised how many people, even those homeschooled Christian conservatives, think that's in the Constitution. And by the way Congress votes, you would think that's in one of the amendments in the Constitution. See? But it's not in the Constitution. Now, this is a very important question, too. Lawmaking abilities are vested in which branch of government? Oh boy, they're all the same. Yes?
Legislative.
Okay, where do we find that? Yes, sir.
Congress.
Where do we find it in the Constitution?
Oh, that would be.
Look it up.
Article 1.
Why don't you read it? And everyone can look on. That's Article 1, Section 1, the very first part of the Constitution. Why don't you stand up and read it as loud as you can?
And all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives.
So, if all lawmaking abilities are vested in Congress, how much are vested in the Supreme Court?
Not.
0. That's a math equation, isn't it? Or how much are invested in the executive branch? So why do we think that presidents can make laws? Or why do we say the Supreme Court is the highest law of the land? It is not. Congress is. Okay? Supreme Court has, by the way, they talk about, oh, we have to have a balance between the three branches. Oh no, Congress has most of the power. Congress has most of the power. The president has less power, the Supreme Court has even less. Supreme Court's not supposed to have any power, it's supposed to judge, it's supposed to have cases in front of it. And the idea that there's supposed to be a balance. And a Supreme Court decision is not supposed to strike down laws. They're supposed to deal with the case. And, a Supreme Court doesn't have an army, does it? Doesn't have its own police force. So who enforces a Supreme Court decision? The Attorney General, which is under what branch?
Executive.
Executive. So the Supreme Court says, we're striking down this law in Texas. Okay, how are you going to enforce it? The Attorney General says, you don't have any authority to do that. You can make a decision, but we're not going to go down and arrest anybody. They arrested a lady in, I think it was Kansas. She refused to give a license to a so-called same-sex marriage. And the federal government went down and put her in a county jail. If I was a sheriff there, I would have put that federal agent in the county jail. Because you said, we have a law that says you can't do this in our state. But as long as you don't have attorney generals that are willing to uphold the Constitution, this is what you're going to have. Okay, how many amendments does the Constitution have? We already met, yes ma'am. 27. What are the first 10 amendments referred to? You guys must be getting tired with your hands going. It's the same hands, okay?
Yes, we are.
Yes, sir. The Bill of Rights. Now, that's very good. The last few years, we didn't do it this year because we had another event going on, but a Flag Day parade in the town of Dedham, Massachusetts. My daughter Emily, she's in the Patriot camp, and a few others. We had a nice float. We had Uncle Sam with us. He was a passenger. We passed out about 500 copies of these, and we asked the people getting them one simple question: what's the first 10 amendments referred to? And young, old, middle age, only about 10% knew. Some of them had no idea what I was talking about. What? What's that about? I have no idea. Like I said, what's the lineup of the Boston Red Sox? He would have told me. What's the batting average of, the leadoff hitter? Dustin Pedroia. Oh, he's hitting .285 and he's got a slugging percentage of what, 7. They know that, but they don't know. I remember a young man came to a table one day and he didn't know. He didn't know the capital of Massachusetts. I said, name 5 characters in SpongeBob. Bop, 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 bop. He knew them all. He named about every crazy character in that stupid show, but he didn't know anything about the Constitution. I think our priorities are just a little bit off. Okay. All right. Oh, what do we got here? Driver update. Don't you hate these annoying things? Okay. Yes, I want to leave. Okay. All right. I love this one. I really love. Which branch of government? Now we're talking about the federal level. Regulates education. Has the power of education. Stand up.
No branch does.
No branch. Wow. You mean to say that we have a Department of Education? So why is that the case? I was asked recently about the new lady that is the head of the Department of Education, Betsy DeVoe. And I said, well, she's probably a whole lot better than anyone Hillary would have appointed. I said, but if she was a true constitutionalist, she would have she would have simply got an auction mallet, auctioned off all of the property, and then to the highest bidder, and then turned the auction mallet in and resigned and fired everybody in the department. Okay, now, I came across a book. I love libraries. Why do I love libraries? Because I love all those books that have libraries. Libraries belong to us too, not just people on the left. By the way, the Ringe Library, a lot of conservative peoples, they have our constitutions. We sponsor constitutions, and a few other places too around the region. So what does that mean? You'd be motivated to do the same thing in your town? Go up to the library and we'll supply them. These are pretty inexpensive. Hey, can we supply you with constitutions? We give you 100 at a time. Put a little thing, compliments of Camp Constitution. How was that for a nice little project? So I got at these libraries. I might put flyers up, I put little pamphlets around, back issues of magazines like the New American. I get about, I don't know how many cases, how many people, we don't get rid of material, we distribute it. We get rid of trash, but we don't get rid of constitutions, we don't get rid of valuable information. So I'll go into a library, leave some back issues. A lot of libraries have a place that will say, you know, take a magazine, leave a magazine, take a book, leave a book. So I'll leave books. I'll put up flyers, you know, on the bulletin boards. And I like to look at the library book sales. And it was about 4 years ago I found this book. It was a big tome of a book. It was called Proceedings of the Constitutional Convention. It was published in 1941 by the U.S. government. Now, who was president in 1941? Anybody know? Yes?
Truman?
No?
FDR.
FDR. What does that stand for? Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Yes. Okay. So was he a conservative Republican constitutionalist? The council say, oh, some of you probably remember him too, right? He was what they call a New Deal socialist. He was a far leftist, okay? And I won't go into all the things that he did and should have done. But, so it was published by a New Deal Democrat administration. And they had a little, it was a celebration of the Constitution. I think they had an earlier printing. And in the book, they had a questions and answers. And one question was, what role does the federal government have in education? And guess what they said in this book? Keep in mind, a New Deal Democrat Socialist administration. They said none. So what happened? There are a lot of Republicans that think we should have a Department of Education. Ron Paul, the former congressman, I think it was in the Department of Education became a cabinet-level position during the Jimmy Carter administration. We're talking about the mid-'70s to 77 to 80. And Ron Paul submitted a bill to change the name from the Department of Education to the Department of Public Education. What's the acronym for Department of Public Education? D-O-P-E. It didn't pass. It didn't pass. He tried to abolish it, but anyway, you have to have a. But if you're a conservative around all liberal, you have to have a good sense of humor. If you don't have a sense of humor, you're gonna go crazy. Okay. So no federal branch has anything to do. But how could we have Common Core mandates, school choice, school to work, and all these crazy things? Now, how about this one? Where in the Constitution is foreign aid mentioned? Come on now, show me. Look it up, the index. Look up foreign aid. There's an index here, right? Anybody see foreign aid? It's not in here. Then how can we give billions of dollars to countries all over the world on a regular basis? In some cases, we support both sides. The people in power, the people out of power. It's unconstitutional. If they want to do that, they need to. How do you change the Constitution? Getting somebody in office, right? No, by an amendment, right? So, how many senators are needed to ratify a treaty? We can look that up. Where do you find the duties of a senator in the Constitution? Article
1.
And okay, Article 1, Section 2, or Section 3? Anyway, yes, sir.
About 2/3.
2/3. Now, 2/3 of those present, right?
Yeah.
So that could be, how many senators are there?
100.
100. So 2/3 of 100 is what?
67.
67. And what, you need 51 to do business? Mr. McManus, 51, a quorum, 51? So you can get an amendment, a treaty passed by about 37 or 38, so, okay? What happens, by the way, when there's a tie in the Senate? What happens? I know, they flip a coin. No? Maybe they do that, I don't know, but under the Constitution, what happens? Who casts a deciding vote?
The president?
No? The Vice President. The Vice President. He's the President of the Senate. And years ago, they actually, John Adams, when he was Vice President, used to run the proceedings. At some point, they stopped. I think when they started building golf courses, that's when they stopped. I don't know exactly when they stopped doing that, but it very seldom does it happen. I think it happened recently. Wasn't it? Did it very recently. Okay. Now this is a good one. Which branch of Congress initiates the impeachment process? Now yes.
Senate.
No. Well, there's only one branch, right?
House.
The House. Okay, now what is impeachment?
It's when a political official is voted out of office,
No,
basically.
no. And it's not, elected officials are not impeached. They can be expelled by a 2/3 vote. I think they tried to impeach a senator way back in the 1790s, and that we can't impeach him. We can expel him, but we can't impeach him. These are the cabinet position members, members of the executive branch, judges, and so forth. Supreme Court justices can be impeached. The president, the vice president, all as members of his cabinet. And there's only been 2 presidents ever impeached. Anybody know? It's a real tough one. Bill Clinton was one. Yeah. Andrew Johnson was the other. Now, were they removed from office? No. Impeachment is, I equate it to like a grand jury indictment, right? There's enough evidence here to take this to the next level, to take a case. So in case of impeachment, the House initiates it, and the Senate acts as a judge, and the Supreme Court Justice presides over it, and you need 2/3 to expel. So it's really hard. It's interesting that we have to really thank our founders to making certain things very difficult. It's very difficult to pass an amendment. And they gave us the Electoral College. Without that, we would be in big trouble. We want to preserve, but we're going to do a class on that a little bit later, in more detail. I equate the Electoral College. Let's say the Red Sox and the Yankees have played 3-game series, right? Game 1, Red Sox win 1-0. Game 2, the Yankees win 10-0. And Mr. Tregenza is a big Yankees fan. I don't want to offend him, right? So Red Sox win 1-0. Game 2, Red Sox lose 10-1, and Game 3, the Red Sox lose 20-1, right? So the Yankees say, well, wait a minute, now we scored all these runs in 3 games, so we should win all 3 games, shouldn't we? Well, they lost Game 1, 1-0. That might be a state like Rhode Island, in the Electoral College. So it's very important that we have the Electoral College. Which branch of government declares war? You guys your hands must be tired, okay? Yes, sir. Executive? No? And by the way, where do we find that? Let's everyone go to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And when you find that, what I'm looking for, first person, put their hand up. Okay, Andrew.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I lost the page. Shoot. Here,
This guy hasn't been caught.
Okay. You ready with it?
Yep.
Okay, read it. Article 1, Section 8. You can stand up.
No.
The Congress shall have powers to lay and collect taxes.
Okay, scroll down. Go down to where it talks about declaring war. You see it? I don't know, is it the 15th clause, the 14th clause? 5th clause. Mr. McManus says the 5th clause.
To declare war, grant letters of marque and
Mark. Yeah.
proposal, make rules concerning captures on land and water.
Okay, so Congress declares war. Now, when was the last time Congress declared war? World War II. Is that true?
yes.
Is that your final answer?
Desert Storm.
Desert Storm. Anybody have another answer? Okay, who thinks that this young lady's correct?
Correct.
With a show of hands, who thinks this young lady's correct? Oh, we're a little tentative. Okay, who thinks this guy's correct? Show of hands. Oh, even fewer. Well, what, you're not going to cast a vote? Are you afraid? Come on. Who thinks this young lady's right? Come on. Who thinks this young man's right? Okay, so democracy, so she's right because we had consensus, right? That's not why. She's correct. We haven't declared war since after Pearl Harbor. But wait a minute now. We've had the Korean War. We've had the Vietnam War. We've had Gulf War and Gulf II. What's going on here? Well, I think Mr. McManus is going to address that in his class a little bit later. He's going to talk a little bit about the United Nations. 1945, Congress passed the UN Participation Act. It said when the Security Council of the UN, that are elected by us, right? They're chosen by the free people, right? No, right? When they say we want to send troops somewhere, we've got to send them. Congress had no authority to do that. The president at the time was Truman, should never have signed that. And that's why we go to all these wars. Howie Carr Show. It's a popular Boston talk show. He's conservative, but he's not a constitutionalist. And he was complaining that we were sending troops to Haiti. It was okay to send them to Bosnia, yeah, it was okay to send them to Haiti. He was, why are we going to Haiti? I called up and I said, because in 1945, Congress passed the UN Participation Act, and when the Security Council of the UN says we're going to send troops, we send troops. That's why. And he never heard that before. Well, how come I know that? I don't have a doctor's degree in the Constitution, right? I say, Daddy Bush. If you go to YouTube and put in George Bush New World Order, you're going to see a speech that President Bush gave to a joint session of Congress. And he said, what we have here is a real chance at this new world order, and the UN is envisioned by its founders. Now, I didn't go to Yale. I wasn't the director of the CIA, but I know who the founders were. I know the man who wrote the UN Charter. He was a Soviet agent. What good can come from the pen of a Soviet agent? But see, so maybe I have to visit Mr. Bush and give him a copy of The Fearful Master, so he'll be up to speed. I think he knew exactly. He also said during the first Gulf War that I want congressional approval. He wasn't asking for a declaration. He just wanted approval. But I'm going to a higher authority. Where was that higher authority? Was it God? No. It was the UN. Nothing in this Constitution says the UN is the higher authority. So, anyway, how are we doing for time? I don't see any angry signs. Is that 1 minute or is it 10 minutes? Okay, all right, we're almost done here. All right, any questions? Well, this is something, again, is going to be with you for a lifetime. All right, and the best way to, we have a lot of problems, we have a lot of forces working to destroy this. Oh, let me address Article 5. Look up Article 5, something really quickly. Who wants to read it? Stand up. This guy has a good booming voice.
The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for opposing amendments, which, in either case, shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall be, in any manner, affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and that no state without its consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate.
Okay. So there are two ways to amend the Constitution. We only have 27 amendments in all the years we've been around since the Constitution 1788. Two of those amendments, one canceled the other out. The 18th. What was the 18th? Yes. That means that you couldn't sell and transport alcohol beverages. And what was the one that nullified that or repealed that?
21st.
21st. Okay.
I have a question about that. Is it possible to repeal the 21st Amendment?
To repeal the 21st Amendment. Well, if you want to bring back prohibition, yeah, I would say so. Yeah. It was interesting. I took Dr. Kishore to the headquarters of the Women's Christian Temperance Union that was very popular way back then. And the fellow that was mayor of mayor of Portland, is a very, very well-liked figure. He was the head of that, head of the temperance movement. And I said today, if he ran for mayor, if someone like him ran for mayor, he'd get about 2% of the vote in Portland. But I just a little digression there. Yeah, so those two amendments kind of nullified each other. And how many amendments have been proposed since the Constitution was adopted? I don't have a figure, but it's over 1,000. Can you imagine if it was really easy to change to an amendment? We'd have a book like this. Look like a Federal Register, and it would have completely destroyed the Constitution. So the founders realized, let's make it difficult on purpose. We've never had a convention under the Constitution, and I don't have I'd be giving dozens of. I'm giving actually a presentation Saturday at a group in New Hampshire on the subject. There's lots of reasons why we shouldn't have one. The main reason is because we have this. We're so divided today. And the fact is there are absolutely no rules and regulations guiding a convention. So whatever they do prior to that, once they sit, they can do pretty much anything they want. And how many people do you think will represent the people at a convention will share the same worldview as these great men? Well, if I'm appointed, maybe, Mr. Renard, Mr. McManus, do you think you're going to be a delegate from Massachusetts?
Okay.
Okay. Mr. King? Yeah. I don't think so. And a lot of Republicans aren't necessarily constitutionalists. And some of these amendments, one of them is a balanced budget amendment. That doesn't sound pretty good, doesn't it? We should have a balanced budget. I contest that we should have a constitutional budget. Because you have a balanced budget, well, when you spend more than you have, what do you have to do to balance that budget? You got to what? You got to do a few things. You can print more money, or you have to raise the taxes. Do you think most of these people want to cut the size of government? No. Then they have something they call a national emergency. So I've seen these proposed amendments for a balanced budget. There's always an escape clause. It says that unless in case of war or national emergency. Look up in the table of contents and show me where national emergency is in the Constitution. Not in it. So you're going to pass an amendment that's going to make national emergencies constitutional. Right? And then it's going to raise your taxes. Then there's term limits. Term limits of, and they say, well, we got a lot of bad people in Congress, so if we just limit the terms, we'll usher in this great new republic. We'll restore the republic. The problem isn't the term limits. The problem is that people back home don't understand the Constitution. With term limits, what you've done is you've elected yourself a permanent lame duck, if they pass that. You know what a lame duck session of Congress is? Anybody know? Lame duck? I know Mr. Affleck would know what a lame duck is, right? How's that for a pun? You get it? Affleck Insurance?
Affleck.
All right. That died. I'll keep my day job. Okay.
Isn't that?
Stand up.
I think that is during the period in which a senator cannot be reelected or.
Well, that's yeah. Well, any official. So your term expired if either you don't run for reelection or you lose your seat. The elections are in November. You're still there to the January.
Right.
So you're not accountable to the voters, are you?
Right. So yeah.
So you might just vote for anything, and a lot of bad legislation has been passed in a lame duck session.
Right.
So now you're just allowing a permanent lame duck session. But we do have term limits. They're called frequent elections, and that's what our founders expected. To limit the terms at frequent elections. So, any questions before we dismiss? Good. All right. Thank you for your attention. God bless.